Thank you so much, Roger. That was amazing. We do have copies of Kingy on that back table, which you can purchase with either new or old money. Our next reader is Anna Maria Hong, excuse me. Anna Maria Hong's first poetry collection, Age of Glass, won the Cleveland State University Poetry Center 2017 First Spoke Poetry Competition and will be published in April 2018. Her novella, H&G, won the A Room of Her Own Foundation's inaugural Clarissa Dalloway Prize and will be published by Sidebrow Books in May 2018. And even though it says May, we have both of those books back there. Her second poetry collection, Fablesque, won Tupelo Press's Berkshire Prize and is forthcoming in 2019. A former Bunting Fellow at the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study, she has published poetry and fiction in over 50 journals and anthologies, including The Nation, The Iowa Review, Poetry, Ecotone, Pool, Fence, Harvard Review, Volta, Verse Daily, Fire on Her Tongue, an anthology of contemporary women's poetry, and The Best American Poetry. She will join the literature faculty at Bennington College in July 2018. Please welcome Anna Maria.
Thank you, Chandra, for the introduction. Thank you to everyone at Malvern Books for staying open late and hosting this wonderful event in this incredible space. Do you guys want to sit down? You can you should come in and make yourselves comfortable. It looks not that comfortable over there. Also, I have to do this because this is really special to me, this event. I think I got you now. Okay, cool. I also want to thank Marla Aiken and the Michener Center for putting this together and making this possible. I mean, I'm just so thrilled to be here, and it's so nice to be back in Austin. It's been 10 years since I've been here. Thank you to Tom Cable and Liz Cullingford for coming to the reading. It's just so thrilling to see you guys. And this is just an incredibly special night for me. I also want to thank my dear friend Clay Smith, who's sitting in the back very unobtrusively after running the San Antonio Book Festival all weekend, which is also part of the reason why I'm here. So, and there are probably people I'm forgetting. Roger, thank you for your reading. It's amazing. It's a pleasure to hear your work, and I'm just such a big fan. So I am going to read from my two books that have just come out, and Malvern does have my novella, even though nobody else has it until today. And I'm really just very excited to read from both of these. The novella is called H&G, and it is retellings of the old fairy tale, Hansel and Gretel, so I'm sure that's familiar to everybody in the room. And I basically invoked Hansel and Gretel as a constraint, and gave myself the permission to retell the tale in all these very short chapters, and also gave myself the latitude to tell the story from different points of view, different characters' points of view, and different styles. Most of it reads like prose fiction, but some of it reads like verse. And I use other forms like the list in these different chapters. I also play with the plot and the outcome of the story. It always bothered me that the kids just go home after Owen was being eaten, passed out into the woods twice. So I actually give them different outcomes. And then a lot of the novella also follows G, or Gretel, into middle age, as she kind of makes, as I envision it, usually she and Hansel make different choices after this trauma, partly determined by gender. So I'm just going to read two short chapters from this, and then I'll read some poems. A fresh way in is a fresh way out. 1. The roar of the wind through invisible leaves. The sound of dirt beneath my feet. Things a child wouldn't normally see. How normal is this situation? We're all cast out sooner or later. Mad at H for packing crumbs this time. Mad at myself for packing nothing. Full stop. 2. The sound of cataracts running like money. Cataracts of the mountain, not the body. We write the cruel stories to avoid them in our future lives. To start down the path again, into the woods with the birds and the thoughts as companions. Dry as a chicken bone, narrow as a cane. Stepmother, the blankest character, perhaps unfairly blamed. What would a happy ending look like if not some form of home, companionship, domesticity? 3. Dot the margin, make it spread like butter. The woods were barren, but safe. Clever G, what will you do with the middle of the story? The witch's spectacular death was just the beginning. 2 women die, 1 man survives. Always blame the other parent. A particularly specious ending, improbable even for the genre. 4. A beautiful chocolate plum cake, a blackbird rising from the steel gray sea. Everyone can think of 7 reasons to end it now or keep going. What happened to the blood mother? The virtue of the ending lies in what does not happen. No prince or huntsman to the rescue, no pernicious dream seeding of wishful thinking. Hard as candy, how was there suddenly enough? 5. Mon Dieu, we'll be sick of this story. We already are. This tale should make you feel a little sick. Christ witch. A normal person wouldn't do this. The sound of money in the afterlife. Alternate ending number 23. G buries the witch's ashes and stays in the candy house, which magically renews itself. The children forage mushrooms, berries, onions, and apples growing in the woods. H learns how to fish. They eat well. They go to school. 6. Alternate beginning number 49. The father tells them straight up, I love you, but not enough to save you. It was your stepmother's idea, but I fully endorse it because I am weak. And frankly, my life and my marriage are more important than the 2 of you. H doesn't bother with the crumbs. 1 disappointment averted. When they come upon the witch's house, the children know full well that it may be a trap. A beautiful house made of candy is of course a little too good to be true. They eat it anyway, given the lack of alternatives. What if the house were made of gluten-free bread, or something that the children should have been eating? Would that have been any better? Would it still be the witch's house? Good German chocolate, hazelnuts, marzipan lattice. No matter the denouement for each protagonist, hunger is a constant. They will never get over being told that there wasn't enough. However, knowing what they know, they don't go back to the father's cottage. They forge on through the forest, eventually crossing into the unenchanted woods, where not surprisingly, they continue to fend for themselves, which is an exquisite nuisance. However, in the wider world, there are benevolent adults, unlike the trio in the woods of childhood. 7. One is always at the mercy of bigger, stronger persons with greater access to the necessary resources, food, shelter, warmth, candy. One is always at the mercy of one's own hunger, which given a deep enough sense of deprivation will become greed, heedless. The children devouring the witch's house, her art. I would like to tell the tale so that it no longer makes me sad. The Europeans ask, but is the crisis apparent? Do you feel it? Having children can make you, like the sea, dark with waves. Alternate ending number 5. The candy house catches on fire, all that burning sugar, and everyone goes down, the witch, H, and G. The parents read about it in the paper and carry on with their strained, bewildered lives. 8. The candy house catches on fire, all that burning fat, but the children run out, running from horror from the rest of their lives. G lives out of a suitcase for years in her adult life, a vagabond, barely unhomeless, homeless. She'll never understand how the witch existed. She'll never understand the desperation that would propel a blood father to cast his children into surefire peril. When he was 15, my brother drove himself and the family car into a wall. He was living with my parents, whom we were both supporting because they didn't have enough. Our blood mother went to the hospital, eyes full of self-pity, and asked my brother for the rent money. She blamed her actions on our father. 9. My father could have gotten a job, which he eventually did. The solution turned out to be very simple. My brother forgave them. I did not. I couldn't fathom acting on that fear, knowing it myself. Alternate ending number 1. I did not love them enough. Forgiveness is the hardest luck. 10. Do I feel bad? Of course, that's why I'm writing this terrible story. It's raining, and the rain is incredibly lovely. Those stones in H's pockets were dead weight, the way back proving useless. You can choose a lighter path. Go through that door with nothing on your person, nothing on your back. And keep going through door after door of each successive room in each successive house until you find the one that's just right. Not the tragic illogic of the cottage of youth or the delusional candy house, but the one that fits, made of wood, stone, mortar, and brick. To make lists is to privilege control and order above all else, to love elegance, sparseness, and the idea of progression, way giving on to way. Some endings cannot be rewritten, and that's all right. The ones who did the damage must want to be forgiven. In the meantime, put down the stone that wishes for rescue. Step through each door after door without looking back. Be in the new strange. As a wise man said, it's easier than you think. And this is just another short chapter. Over the sea. There's a lot and a little both here, said the new Hansel, describing the small village G had just arrived in. She had traveled to this village in the north at the invitation of Kay, the director of an artist residency in the village. G had never heard of the place before, but she knew the area from the wanderings of her youth, as she had worked there among the fjords and mountains for one golden summer, picking red berries and preparing apples for the harvest. Unemployed now, she had truly had no money then, and all her possessions had fit into a green rucksack with leather straps, all her possessions being some clothes, toiletries, a laundry line, a sink plug, and some books, including a biography of Gandhi, which a kind man in the South had given her, and which she still hadn't read. That was the first time she'd left the cottage, leaving H behind to fend for himself, as there had been no persuading him to leave. I'm more dependent, he had said. I'm the baby. He was younger by only a few minutes, but G had understood this statement to be mostly true. So she'd packed her rucksack and found out where she could take a ship across the sea to P, the furthest place she could think of. She already knew her way around and through the woods by heart, and had figured it would take only 2 days travel on foot to get out of the forest and to the harbor where the ship was. She had left the cottage in the very early morning before anyone else was up, leaving a note on the bread box that said, I won't be returning this time. Please give H my share of the food, G. Then she had added, and remember, there's always enough. Even then, especially then, G had felt rage and distrust for her stepmother and contemptuous pity for her father's weakness, and the way he caved over and over again to their stepmother's attempts to starve, eject, and passively kill H and G, in spite of telling them how much he cared for them. G distinctly remembered the look on his face when they had returned to the cottage, dirty, exhausted, and tick-ridden. H still plump from the witch's nefarious overfeeding, G scraggly as a chicken foot. Their father had smiled before crying out and embracing them, but for an instant before that, there was a flash of something else, fear perhaps, or what G later interpreted as self-pity for the struggles to come. The escape, therefore, had been easy. No one had stopped her, as G had known no one would, and no one came looking for her. She had slipped through the forest along a familiar series of paths, leaving the enchanted woods, and making her way to the seaside port where she would begin the voyage. And that had been a fantastic summer, beginning with that first journey across the dark blue ocean. Prior to setting out, G had earned a little bit of money by doing chores for an elderly couple who had taken pity on her in age, and she worked on board the ship, scrubbing the latrines and washing the deck each night to pay for her fare. The work was so easy. She left the latrines and deck gleaming. She had always worked, and the ship's crew supervisor was pleased with her efforts, which did and did not surprise her. In the months and years to come, G would do many jobs that would satisfy many bosses in different lands, picking oranges in the South, serving beer to the pale men and women in L, gathering signatures for the population counts in R, selling books of mostly low value in the big city of B, and of course more cleaning and caring, carting and lifting. All that was decades ago, thought G, who now in middle age had found herself for the first time suddenly unemployed. And here was a new Hansel who looked nothing like the old one, who like G had pitch black hair with eyes to match. The new H was large with dirty blonde hair and goofy blue eyes, like the storybook Hansels that G had read about. He wore a striped black and white shirt as if he'd just gotten out of a comic book jail, and had a small paunch and a very direct gaze. As it turned out, the new H was exactly G's age. G didn't know what her brother looked like anymore, though she imagined him to still be a bit chubby, perhaps bearded and rabbinical, but more Asiatic. G's own weight had waxed and waned throughout her adulthood according to her financial station. The poorer she was, the more she ate, ever since she had had the means to feed herself. And during her bouts of wanderlust, when she absolutely could not stay in one place for more than a few weeks at a time, there had been 4 thus far, she either put on the pounds from anxiety and inertia or shed them from overactivity and illness. This time she was ravenous, eating bowl after bowl of muesli, with the sour cultured milk of this northern land, fried sausages, salads of beets and hard-boiled eggs, tubes of cod roe dyed bright pink, thick slices of brown bread with butter, triple heapings of noodles with tomatoes and butter. The witch would have been very pleased. New Hansel was sitting across from G at a long wooden table. G offered him a tube of mayonnaise and somewhat reluctantly pushed a box of half-eaten oat crackers toward him, asking, "Do you want these?" Clearly somewhat disgusted, he declined, which made G smile with relief. Okay, so that's H and G. Excuse me. And now I'm going to read from Age of Glass, which is my first poetry collection, and I'm very excited that this has finally come out. I worked on this book for it was 14 years, from start to finish, from when I first started drafting this. It's all sonnets. It comprises almost entirely sonnets, except for one poem in the collection. And I started drafting these in 2004, and this book has finally come out. So I'm just really, really excited. My initial project was just to draft 100, just to do it, just to give myself one less decision to make. And I always loved the form, and I really kind of needed this like kind of tidy box to play around in, and it was that was the initial project. I ended up, because I wrote the poems over 7 years, I ended up drafting well over 300, and then just kind of revising and winnowing and culling for many more years, and then, getting it out there. So, anyways, in terms of content, there are also, I was also in this collection working with retellings of myth and fairy tale and folk tales from different cultures, mostly the European fairy tales and the Greek Greco-Roman myths, which are sort of embedded in my consciousness from the time I was little. But there is a feminist agenda, so trying to invest a lot of those poems with more characterization from the female characters' points of view and all of that. A number of the poems, like Age of Glass, or the Glass Age, also concern, they have the word age in the title, and they also really just concern the strangeness of living in the 21st century and this kind of failing and dying empire as we speed toward apocalypse. On that cheery note. I will read just 5 poems from this. The Platinum Age. Depression was all the rage. We were at the end of a line and did not know it. We rang and sent our hearts out. The fat of the land was separating. The fit got very fit. Obese morbidity was slung in fluent, plural, capitalist suicide songs. Our currency pretty much ripped. Our leaders also maximalist devourers, indiscriminate though well-informed. We were still excellent readers. We learned to help ourselves. An abridged spell of fortune was about to be reordered, shuffled like cards in a pre-war era as we wrote our memoirs in diamond on mirror. Plainest hymn. The Antichrist was pretty good, but the misogynist was superhuman. An A-list antagonist, and your quotidian vermin, the kind of beast who makes women apologize to exist. A nasty condition, really feeling the grist in one's soul, grating like zest in an open cut or a gritty violin. The song comes out thin and testy, in spite of all the protein one ingests. Like a moron, one persists, like a priest or a catechist, chanting at a bris. The sermon becomes ingrown. To be honest, it's a pain. The cruelest twist, protean strength won't move the Rubicon. And this one is told from the point of view of Medea from Greek myth. She's probably my favorite character from Greco-Roman myth for many reasons. She's famous for killing her own kids, and that's after her husband decides to leave her and after she's helped him get the golden fleece. And her husband was Jason of Jason and the Argonauts. So I don't love her because she killed her kids. I kind of just love her because she's this kind of, she's unusual for Greek heroes in that she's female. She's actually not Greek. She's from this land called Colchis, which was kind of an Asiatic land, so she's potentially Asian. And also she gets away with everything. So most Greek heroes like Heracles, etc., like just come to a terrible end after doing everything right and atoning a million times. And she does all these horrible things. She kills like her brother, she kills her kid, she kills like the princess that Jason wants to marry, etc. And then she just kind of, after all of that, she gets to marry the king of Athens and sail away. So anyways, this poem takes place at that moment. Medea 5, Departure. Whale Road. The path to Athens glittered with blues, and as we rolled, I dove under with those broad gray backs through each wave. What mattered now? A clutch of minnow breaking surface asunder, the sun in my face burning like potential, salt in my hair, my skin. The knowledge of you unable to locate the source of denial. The world billowing below this normal vessel. The spray and scent and speed. A strafe of white gulls peeling over the hull's wall, blooming like bare streaks. A hint of fire on the horizon. Upon leaving the kingdom where every hero is a victim and vice versa, the V-shaped flight of something rising in rows and rows and rows. And one fairy tale poem, it is based on Hansel and Gretel, and this is for Marla. F, H, and G. I'm a virgin in a dirty apron holding a pear and a black stripe. Will you tell me about your troubles, R-E, the letter F? First, let's find a future infant matron and a falling apart version of the effed up fairy fiction of the fraternal Grimm. At Forest Fringe, our Agon begins, as fur-clad feral children fling crumbs from fastidious limbs. Full of fail, unfettered, these orphans are furious, as only those who find themselves flung can be. Their futile litter has fueled their hunger for the candy house of revenge. These newfound foundlings, forsaken twins, one fat, one finally fed up, give fate a firm shove. And this is the last poem that I'm going to read, and it's the title poem, The Glass Age. Every age an age of glass, a slipper shoes the foot, takes giant steps of talk and tick, a cone blown, known gone, glass is fashioned, metal spun to color, mineral made light, and this is the last poem I will write. Glass is sand, is time falling loose, a gap of glass is wrapping, a bottle or swan of the human whose hand will flip the glass, grabbing it by the neck. Every time a nick. And it is our glass to raise and smash. A female silhouette, a shape, a vase, with two closed ends, one met. Two cones have kissed, and the skin of our limit is glass. Thank you.